From DC Fire and EMS was asked a question from a reporter about balancing gathering evidence and preserving the wreckage for evidence in this investigation and recovering lives and recovering people. And he said that, of course, we put people first no matter what, and that would be their focus this evening is to continue a search and rescue effort through the night and as long as it takes. But a sobering reminder of the magnitude of the situation as Ted reports that it looks like there could be victims in the double digits at this point. And of course, we will bring you more information as we learn it. I think what we learned today from the press conference is they're still trying to gather as much information as they can before they commit to numbers, before they commit to what's going to happen next.
And their priority, they said for sure, is recovering loved ones, the families, the people that were on board those aircraft. News 4's Mark Seagraves is standing by. Mark, you've been with us all evening now. What else are you hearing tonight?
Yeah, I want to point your attention over here. We're on Dangerfield Island. This is the Washington Sailing Marina on the Virginia side of the river across from Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. And what you're seeing right now, we showed this a little earlier, but the search mission has now shifted to this side of the river. All evening long, the search effort has been on the side of the river closest to Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, where the plane and the wreckage of the helicopter are located. But in the past 30 minutes or so, we've seen the helicopters sweep this side of the river along Dangerfield Island, and now we're seeing multiple boats come into this area doing a very slow, methodical search of this shoreline. And I can tell you, we're in the dark here. We're not using all of our lights because Park Police came up to us and asked us to turn our lights down because our light was reflecting on the water and was hampering their ability to search this shoreline. And they were actually searching right in this marina where we were standing, right on these floating docks. They were going up and down each one of these docks, searching here. And you can see now more and more boats coming to this side of the river. Again, as sources told me earlier this evening, that plane split in two. It is in about 7 feet of water, again, just off the shoreline of Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. Divers have made their way into both now the plane and the helicopter. Originally, the helicopter was not stable enough for divers to get in, but you heard Chief Donnelly say during the press conference that now divers have also made their way inside of the helicopter. We don't have any more information other than that, but again, you see multiple boats now sweeping this side of the Potomac River. I can also tell you, going along with what Ted Oberg has been reporting about the recoveries of bodies, that sources have told me that the D.C. Office of the Chief Medical Examiner is setting up a site along the river in southwest near Audi Field, where a D.C. helicopter is stationed for a recovery site for what they are describing as possibly the largest recovery of bodies since the Air Florida tragedy, where more than 70 people perished in a plane crash in the Potomac River not far from this site. And if you go back to the 1950s, there was another mid-air collision right almost in this exact same spot that had numerous fatalities as well. It was on this side of the river rather than the far side of the river. But again, you can see these crews now searching underneath these piers with their lights, looking for any sign of either survivors or bodies that they might find on either side of the river. So just a very, very tragic scene here. I will say, listening to the press conference, I have known and covered Mayor Bowser for more than 20 years, her entire career in politics. And this is about as somber as I have heard her speak in public. I could really tell from the timbre of her voice how much this incident has impacted her, the gravity of it, and that certainly came through listening to her as she took questions and tried to give out as much information as possible. Of course, we're always wanting more information than they're obviously able to give at times. but just having covered the mayor for so many years, her entire political career, I can tell you from watching that press conference, that was just about the most somber tone I've ever seen her in public. So this is impacting her as it is impacting all of us here as this search and rescue mission continues along the banks of the Potomac River. That's the very latest. Back to you guys.
Mark, thank you. A very grim, a very challenging task for those search and rescue teams out there. Chief Johnley was talking about the icy waters out there. He was saying how cold it was. There were chunks of ice out there. And you heard Mark describe how it was hard for them to see because the lights that we were using were reflecting on the water, and they needed to be able to use their own lights so they could see because it's so dark. It is murky out there. They're dealing with wind, and they've been out there now since roughly 9:30 on Wednesday evening.
Yeah, and he said the most challenging aspect of this effort was access, but he did also mention that divers have been able to get to both aircraft at this point. Mm-hmm. So, as we've been hearing from officials in first responders and also the mayor and the transportation secretary, they're really focused on people right now, and they're not going to let up their efforts if it takes all night to recover everybody who was on that plane.
News 4's Walter Morris has been at Reagan National all evening tonight. And Walter, what is the latest? You are inside there. We know there were passengers there earlier who were not able to continue on with their flights. What's the situation right now?
Well, Sean, on the airport is pretty much cleared out now. As you mentioned, we just saw that update from officials. And one of the things that really struck out to us is that they're saying there's a special part of this airport, the American Airlines Lounge, that they have now cordoned off where they are updating family members. Of course, the big question for many of those people is just trying to get an update on their loved ones. When we heard from officials earlier, they really were trying to be very delicate as they talk about this difficult rescue efforts. But of course, flights here will be shut down. This airport will be closed until 11 a.m. tomorrow. Now, when we got that update, we did learn that 19 other flights were diverted to Dulles as all of this unfolded. Again, this really playing out just before 9 p.m. So it's now been several hours. We know hundreds of first responders are now out there trying to rescue and find as many people as they can. Now, as far as passengers who were not involved in that flight, of course, we've been talking to them, many stuck on the tarmac and really just watching in disbelief as they saw the response, all of the sirens, all of those police and fire officials as they made their way to the scene. But of course, not a lot of information coming out earlier, and now slowly as it is trickling in, unfortunately, this is just a very tragic situation, but officials say they will continue to work throughout the evening as they try to just recover more people and find more people who are on that flight.
Walter, we know that most people have left the airport for the evening, and you talked about the special area that they set up in one of the American Airlines lounges for the family members. Were you able, at any point earlier today, able to speak with any of them, or were they already placed into that special area where they could be together?
Well, so we were arriving right as some of them were finding out. So as we were making our way here, that is when we saw airport officials blocking off a part of the airport, really where all of those officials that we just saw speak, where they were gathering to get all of that information. But really, so far, what we've seen over here is some of those people who were just stuck on flights waiting to take off. And as we heard earlier, some of them saying, breathing a sigh of relief, but also just their hearts breaking because they were saying that could have been us. And so for a lot of them that we spoke with, of course, now they're thinking twice about the next time they will fly out, depending on if they were trying to get home or if they were just going on trips. That one woman we spoke with earlier going to visit family and now putting that trip on pause. But again, things will slowly start to resume normal operations here around 11 a.m. But of course, a lot of people just still very heavy hearts and really very just somber here as we try to get more information.
Absolutely. Walter, you mentioned the airport is pretty much cleared out. As officials have said, there will be no more flights coming in and out of Reagan National Airport. Have any of the first responders or officials from D.C. or the government stayed behind, maybe in hopes of talking to the people who are waiting for their loved ones?
As we know, the mayor and some of those other federal officials that we saw, the senators here, they were just mentioning that this personal connection. And we do know, we don't know if they've actually spoken with them directly. We do know they're sort of taking the lead from American Airlines, who has also set up that 1-800 number for people who think their loved ones may have been on that flight. But right now, such a very tense, sensitive situation.
Coming in, where the helicopter was. We've seen that incredible video that actually captured the moment of impact. Our Doug Kammerer sort of broke down, if you're looking at the map of Reagan National, how this may have happened. Let's listen in.
Yeah, and where this came through, I mean, once again, we continue to talk about the main runway. That's this runway right here. This is the one that runs north-south. This is the one that almost all of us come in on. Now, what's interesting, this is 33 right here. This is another one. This is 4. This is one that's no longer in use. Why not? Because of the bigger buildings down to the south. They have actually taken that one out of service, which is amazing, that now we're down to 2 runways. And this one, as Ted was talking about, one of the busiest in the country here. So now you're talking about a smaller plane. Still 60 people or more on that plane making its way in. And once again, this is the 133 right here. Now, as it made its way in, making its way towards there, at the same time, you had the helicopter coming off from the east. Those two met right over the river. Inside the river, we've been talking about where this is, only about 7 feet deep. The Potomac River, as wide as it is kind of amazing. On the east side of this is close to 30 feet deep on the east side. On the west side, right along the airport, it goes down to about 10 feet. But right in the middle, it's between about 3 and 7 feet. So you could almost stand in this area. And that's probably why, as Adam Tuss was talking about, you could see some of the wreckage. I want to go back towards the video that we were looking at a little bit earlier and show you how this was playing out. Here's the plane right here. Here's the helicopter. Look at the helicopter going right at it. At this point, they are actually talking to the helicopter, saying, hey, do you see this plane? Do you see this plane? He says yes, and he's asking for clearance, but yet still for some reason continues to go right in towards the plane. You see the fireball there at the same time. Now you're watching the smoke coming out. It makes its way in towards the Potomac. No fireball after that because, of course, it moves into the water. And now you're talking about those people. Any survivors that did manage to survive the initial crash are now in 35 to 36 degree water. And once again, hypothermia really sets in about 15 to 30 minutes. Average survival time only about 60 to 90 minutes. So you can tell what's going to be happening here as they're looking out that way. But right now, in 7 feet of water as this thing made its way down. Once again, just look at that. Just incredible what we're looking at right now, and unfortunate that we're dealing with what we're dealing with.
It is incredible indeed just to see that moment of impact that was captured there on that camera.
Right, and we've been talking about the restricted airspace and what could have happened. This is a military Black Hawk helicopter on a training flight out of Fort Belvoir in Virginia, and a commercial jetliner, an American Eagle flight coming from Wichita, Kansas, colliding in midair, so close to the runway and from landing, and then plunging into the river. Mark Seagraves, that the plane was broken into 2. The chief of fire and EMS talking about the drivers trying to access that to not only recover bodies, but to get evidence at this point.
Absolutely, because we know the investigation, the FAA is right here in Washington, so they will be here very quickly to begin the investigation. But there are going to be a lot of questions about, even though that Black Hawk was on a routine training path and the aircraft were coming in, how could that happen? How could it happen like that? a lot of people are going to be questioned, and it may take days, it may take weeks, it may take months before we finally get solid answers here.
We do have audio from the air traffic control tower in that moment, and let's listen to that.
Fire command. The accident happened in the river. Both the helicopter and the plane crashed in the river. It's east of the approach end of runway 33.
Is the airfield closed?
Yes, the airfield is closed. The airfield is closed.
Runways as well?
Yes, all runways are closed. Nobody's landing. No one's moving at all. It was probably out in the middle of the river. I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone. So I haven't seen anything since they hit the river, but it was a CRJ and a helicopter that hit. I would say maybe a half-mile off the approach end of 33.
Just to listen to that, their conversation as they watched it, they saw it, and then they're going back and forth because nobody was quite sure what happened. Clearly, that will be a key piece of the investigation as this moves forward.
And of course, now we know what happened. And as Chief John Donnelly from the DC Fire and EMS told reporters who gathered there, right now their number one mission still is search and recovery.
Right.
And both the mayor and he said that they would not stop doing their work until they were able to reach everyone who was on board. 64 people on the plane, and then of course the 3 military personnel who were on the Black Hawk helicopter. And this is a very, very challenging operation. They are dealing with dark, murky waters. He even mentioned the wind on the water, which can be a factor. And the fact that they've been doing this for a long time. They are trained professionals. This is what they've, do every day in terms of their jobs. But still, we have to think about how hard this can be for them.
It's got to be a challenge, not only because of the conditions, but also the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, they know now, and we've heard from Ted Oberg reporting that multiple bodies have now been recovered. So, I would assume there's some sort of hope when you think you're going to find survivors, but when you kind of know now your mission is just to recover bodies, it's got to be even more grim for those first responders who are out there. And Chief Donnelly said there were about 300 first responders, that state, federal, local responders from all over our region. We heard they were bringing in resources from Maryland and Virginia and DC to help out with this mission to recover everyone.
And this is heartbreaking work. There was a senator from Kansas, Jerry Moran, who spoke about lobbying for this exact flight, to have a nonstop flight from Wichita, Kansas to Washington, D.C. He said that's what Washington's about. So many people from all over the country coming here, and he wanted that flight. So he says this is personal for him. He says he knows he's going to know the families there who are now waiting in the American Airlines lounge to hear word about whether or not their loved ones survived this crash. It is heartbreaking work.
I think that tonight is probably one of the most grim things, is to think of the families and the loved ones who are waiting tonight to hear anything about their loved ones. What do we say, 67 people in total were on those aircraft tonight. And again, the main mission is to recover them. Just in case you're just joining us now at 1:43 on Thursday morning. No, we are not your normal morning news team, but we are glad that you are with us today. We were speaking earlier. If you've lived in D.C. for any sort of time, this particular crash brings up memories 43 years ago. That 1982 crash, Air Florida Flight 90 crashed into the 14th Street Bridge and also plunged into the icy Potomac on January 13th, the icy cold waters.
And I've seen the video of the rescue where there were people hanging onto ladders connected to the rescue planes, trying to get them out. The fact that there were 5 survivors at all in those conditions was incredible. And it's a moment of history in Washington, D.C. And News 4 transportation reporter Adam Tuss, who's been covering transportation for 20 years, says that's a marker in a tragic event that happened at the airports. And here we are, 2015, starting the year off in an unthinkable crash, a mid-air collision between a commercial jetliner and a military helicopter. and the scope of the investigation, the scope of the response, and of course the scope of tragedy when we think about lives that are lost.
The many lives that will likely be lost. Let's check in now with our Mark Seagraves. Mark, you have spoken with some of the crews who are out there searching the frigid Potomac tonight. What is the latest? What are you hearing?
Yeah, you can hear actually the helicopter coming over me here on Dangerfield Island. They have been searching meticulously this shoreline for the past hour or so. And I can report that law enforcement sources are telling me that, in fact, they have recovered some body parts on this side of the river just in the past hour or so, since we've seen these small craft boats, and you see some more of them out there on the water right now coming this way. But just in the less than the past hour, they have recovered some body parts on this side of the river along the shoreline of Dangerfield Island, across from the crash site, which is on the other side of the river from us, closer to Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. So again, still the news just keeps getting more and more grim every time we come back on to report it. But it's a developing situation. It's a large search area that police are going over, and first responders and fire and rescue are going over. But that is the latest information that we're getting here from this side of the river, where the search effort has extended to just in the past hour. Back to you guys.
Mark, I have a quick question for you. Earlier you were saying, I guess it is just procedure, and I think we heard this from the Chief Donnelly, that they put out a call for any vessels to help aid with the search and rescue out there?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We have seen some private vessels, some large either yachts or those cruise ships that do the dining cruises up and down. But earlier we did see vessels like that out on the water here. And actually, I was looking on, there's a marine traffic app that you can look at that shows you the boat traffic on water wherever you are, and it was showing several private vessels in this area. So in addition to the hundreds and hundreds of first responders and the watercraft and air